We're going to start today with our first subject, which is cultural tourism and the arts. It's a little bit different than, kind of the stuff that's being talked about on the Hill. We're warming up to some of the heavier economic policy, but cultural tourism, the arts, is a major part of the economic fabric of our society today. And here to begin the conversation is Congressman Paul Tonko. Paul represents New York's 20th congressional district, and he has done so since 2009. So he came to Congress right in the middle of the financial crisis. He is serves on the Energy and Commerce Committee, the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Environment and Economy, and a member of the Congressional Arts Caucus. Before serving at the national level, he was a member of the New York State Assembly for over 2 decades. Congressman, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and what a pleasure to be able to join CED and share some thoughts with you at this luncheon gathering as you open your conference. Let me thank all of you, whether as CEOs or policy individuals that reflect the full gamut of the political spectrum, for being a united voice and working through some of the differences and creating a message and offering the advocacy that moves us forward. You know, every election year is important to this nation, but I would suggest presidential years inspire a lot of soul searching. And what's interesting is a lot of people are now doing soul searching as we go into this opportunity of cleaning the board, creating a new start, and working with a newly elected Congress and with a new presidential administration. So it's great timing, and it's an opportunity for all of us to think outside the ordinary and to, through that soul searching, create an agenda that will foster job growth. And I'm very happy to note that amongst the many issues that you'll be discussing, ranging from women's leadership to economic growth to tax policy reform, and a plethora of issues that are pertinent to the strengthening of this nation, you have added cultural amenities like museums and the arts and heritage areas and heritage tourism. I think that's so very valuable. I represent the capital region of New York, which is an historic area in and of itself. But having been in this business for a long time, I started as a county board member in my home county way back in the mid-'70s. And so I stand here as somewhat of a dinosaur. I share that here because it probably doesn't hurt me if I say it at home to say you've been there too long. Joking, because I stay in contact with my district all the time. And I think that dialogue is important. But the reason I mentioned that 70s era is that New York State led the nation in many ways to focus on tourism as an economic multiplier. And their I Love New York campaign became a very much watched instrument and was replicated around this country for many reasons, primarily because, again, tourism is a driving force for the economy. And it's worked and worked well. It's continued throughout these years, and it showed the diversity of New York in its tourism narrative, from not just a metro area of New York City known around the world, but to the rural components, the suburban, all of the history that is part of New York's map, and have shared that in a very powerful way. And so that engaged me in this activity. But now one of the most hot buttons of tourism happens to be heritage tourism, where we share our heritage and history, our storytelling of who we are as a people and what we are as a place. And I think that bears great relevance to the work that you'll be assigning yourselves over the next coming conference here as you put together the components of an economic recovery agenda. Why I think this is important is because, as I'll share with you, I'll put into various buckets the areas that I think are of great concern, not only in providing for resources and revenues and growing our economy, but also expressing who we are as a people, allowing us to address the dignity of life, the quality of life, and advancing a chemistry, an effervescence, if you will, that enables us to foster a better zone that we call home. So in the areas of address, I would suggest heritage areas, certainly historic preservation, museums, and that wonderful added piece of education cultural aspects, and then finally the arts. So as it turns out, I was working with heritage tourism in the state of New York. I served there in the state assembly for 25 years. And one of my most proud moments was advancing a New York statewide heritage area concept, which enabled us to take the map of New York and put together common geography that had similar dynamics, where people wove their threads of interest together to create a tapestry of history and heritage in those given areas based on commonality. In my area, the Mohawk Valley Heritage Corridor was one that really spoke to the Industrial Revolution, the American Revolution, where we had the most forts of the Revolutionary War, where we were the breadbasket to feed the troops, where we sparked a westward movement through our Industrial Revolution. Geography was a theme simply because the waters of that area became the ink that wrote our history. It was a determinant for the military aspects as we broke away from a homeland that then defined us as an up-and-coming nation. And so those are powerful dynamics that speak so forcefully to who we are as a people, and again, as a sense of place. And I've always argued that place esteem is as important as self-esteem. We all know those programs that will address everything from alcoholism as a disease to teenage pregnancy or whatever, where we rebuild the fabric of the individual by reaching to esteem. I am somebody, I am important. Well, so is the power of place esteem. Knowing where you call home, where you live, work, or visit, making that a special place is important. Important also to decision makers in our economy. Decision makers who land jobs in these given regions of our country will do so because they're looking for significant places. And oftentimes, our heritage area expression can be a tiebreaker in that toolkit that lands jobs. Economic development is a very, very competitive business. You know that better than I. But it's important to have a tiebreaker for many of these communities. And if they can express the significance of place, that is, I think, a moving measure for the decision makers who will determine up or down for the jobs to come to a region. Now, I will just talk about the dynamics of the Mohawk Valley Heritage Corridor, which now, in my capacity in the Congress, is part of a greater area called the Erie-Canalway Heritage Corridor, which runs from the capital region out to Buffalo, New York, and beyond. And that is a very key component to the federal partnership that we enjoy in upstate New York. When we think of it, the Canalway is one of the heritage areas that I represent, the other being the Hudson River Valley Heritage Area, which, again, brought together a very historic collection of towns and communities that were impacted by the Hudson Valley, the river itself, by the visit of Henry Hudson as he sailed up that Hudson and discovered a new land here in America. Very poetic, very passionate expressions that speak to, again, that power of place. But back to the Canalway corridor. Taking a small town, New York, and creating it into a port where it could accept and become more meritorious as a trade center, gave birth to a necklace of communities dubbed mill towns. All throughout upstate New York, we have this chain, this necklace, that is a powerful expression of mill towns that became epicenters of invention and innovation. And for many of those factors, it was our immigrant ancestors who then landed there and created the growth in the economy simply through their common sense and their industriousness and their passion to make life work. And as they did that, it created this westward movement, the growth not only of New York, but the entire country, and sparked an industrial revolution whereby the products from this country impacted the quality of life of not only people in the US as it continued to grow, but to nations around the world. That is a significant, powerful thing that speaks to a pioneer spirit that is part of the DNA of the people of that canal zone. Yes, you can extend that, extrapolate it over the map of the country, but I remind people in our zone, always think back to that. You know, and lofty places inspire lofty thinking. So for an economic community, for job creators, for those who land jobs in our community, lofty thinking by your employees is an incredible value added. It allows for people to feel good about themselves and the place they call home. It's a place that substantiates a very powerful exchange with other areas in the country. And so I'm a very proud proponent of heritage areas. There are bills that we have fostered through a bipartisan caucus. What's nice about heritage tourism is that it has bipartisan support. Charlie Dent, a representative from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, is a colleague of mine, and together we formed a bipartisan caucus on heritage areas. And our goal is to draw more attention, more policy development that further makes effective the heritage area expressions and provides for resources so that we can, again, lure public-private partnership. With many of these ideas, and we'll talk about museums and library services, and certainly heritage areas, but for every federal dollar invested in these programmatic areas, there's a $5 anticipated return. And it's justified because it's been proven over and over again. So when we develop that public-private partnership, it's real, and it's economic development. We have a bill, H.R. 581, that reauthorizes our heritage areas, but makes them even more effective components, partners in the toolkit that enable us to go forward and express again this significant place, which I think is powerful. Where you land, where you determine to set up shop, where you expand is important to the economic development community, to CEOs and to business minds alike. And I think it's a powerful bit of policy that we need to continue and hopefully expand upon. When it comes to our preservation, historic preservation, again, there's a bill, H.R. 2817, that would reauthorize for another 10 years the Historic Preservation Amendment Act. And it allows for us to continue those services. The infrastructure, powerful places have powerful infrastructure. Historic homes. I used to operate out of the Guy Park Manor in Amsterdam, New York, as one of my satellite offices with the help of New York State's Culture Ed. And they were thrilled to have us as a tenant. But it was the wedding gift of Sir William Johnson to his daughter. And it told people of the history of this nation. You know, right now, coming off an election, we're reminded that we need to visit history. We need to keep our young generations involved with history so that we learn from history and that we also are driven by the accomplishments that people have made in the past. A powerful place like Guy Park Manor in Amsterdam serves as a crown jewel of historic landmark. And it reminds us repeatedly of the war, where Mr. Johnson was on the wrong side, the government took the home, and it became an historic site. You know, many of our young people don't know enough of the history. We need to inform and educate and connect much better. Historic preservation does that. Historic homes that require, you know, a partnership, again, incentives that will enable people to restore and rehab these facilities and keep them in their precious heritage sense is very important. It's key to the quality, again, of the community. And with the impact of museums. The Institute of Museums and Library Services is a powerful force. You're going to hear from Laura a lot. And Laura, thank you for being such a great partner. You're awesome as a leader of that institute. But we put together, I think it was 132 members of Congress, signed on to a letter that went to the Appropriations Committee requesting, perhaps demanding, robust funding for our museums and for our libraries. They're incredible cultural infrastructure. They are incredible education infrastructure that, again, gives a hands-on sense of learning to the next generations. You know, if you as a business community are concerned about developing the workforce of the future, and I believe you are, then we need to have as full, as in-depth as possible an education process. Cultural ed adds to that significant product that's delivered to children, our next workforce. And with that, we're reminded there are 35,000 museums in our nation that have a $20 billion economic impact. Talk about value added. And that $20 billion impact is driving a lot of incredible sharing in our communities. They're hiring 400,000 people in this country. No small bit of value added to any of the communities, any of the regions across this country. And so we will continue to put our foot forward. We will lead that effort of colleagues in a bipartisan fashion that asks for robust funding for our cultural ed component. And then finally with the arts. The very first caucus I joined when I came to town was the Arts Caucus, looking to add again a robust bit of funding for a National Institute of the Arts, and the National Endowment of the Arts, and National Endowment of Humanities. Incredibly important components of not only our quality of life, but certainly our economic development. We need that. You know, when we restore centers of our urban cores, they're historic, beautiful theaters that then showcase tremendous delivery of opportunities to everyone in that area to absorb and consume. The arts, we all know, are powerful forces. They get us to relax and consume perhaps change that would not have been developed within our hearts and souls had it not been for the arts community. They educate, they inform us, they challenge us, and they require us to think outside the ordinary again. And so all of these elements, from heritage areas to museums and library services, to historic preservation, and to the arts community, are powerful tools in the kit that will allow for public-private partnerships that will enable us to go forward in, I think, as sound a fashion. And as we do that, it's not just growing the economy, it's developing the quality of life and lifting all of us to a higher level. You know, that's the kind of outcome I would think all of us as Americans require and deserve. So I hope that we can champion with you the advocacy, the outcry for investments in areas that will provide significant growth in our economy and at the same time lift us as a people, challenged by tremendous history here that speaks to us soulfully and renders us, I think, a powerful lot. So I wish you well with your conference. I wish you well as you go forward, and good luck with the policy advocacy. We require those partners in this town to be outspoken and concerned about our tomorrows. Thank you so much.